In the specialized field of vascular medicine, there exists a rare physician who masters not only the surgical suite, but also the public airwaves. Dr. Todd Berland, Director of Outpatient Vascular Interventions at NYU Langone in New York, represents the remarkable intersection of clinical excellence, groundbreaking research, and public education that I believe transforms how society understands vascular health. As principal investigator on multiple clinical trials, Dr. Berlin actively advances the evidence base that shapes modern vascular care, especially when it comes to peripheral artery disease. His innovative approach to minimally invasive techniques has allowed countless patients to recover more quickly and return to the daily lives. But what truly distinguishes Dr. Berland in his commitment to sharing complex medical knowledge beyond hospital walls. That's really what is truly amazing about him. It's not just about in the hospital, it doesn't stop there. He goes well beyond that. Through his Vascular Surgery Show on Sirius XM's Doctor Radio, he translates sophisticated concepts into accessible information that empowers listeners nationwide, not just physicians and clinicians and people in industry, but patients as well. The impact of this dual commitment is just truly profound. Patients report regularly that his broadcasts deepened their understanding of vascular disease, often leading them to seek life saving and limb saving interventions that they would have never known to pursue otherwise. In a medical landscape where specialists rarely venture into public education, Dr. Berlin's unique ability to excel in both the operating room and the broadcast studio just truly exemplifies the very definition of innovation in vascular medicine. So please welcome our 2025 Excellence in Vascular Innovation and Public Education Award recipient, Dr. Todd Berland. Congratulations, well deserved.
Thanks so much, Kim. It's such a nice introduction. I really appreciate that.
So, your career spans clinical practice and research leadership and public education. What initially inspired you to pursue vascular medicine in the first place? And then, at what point in your journey did you realize the importance of public education alongside your clinical work and education you do with your patients every day?
Excellent question. I went into medicine initially wanting to be a pediatrician. I thought about my own pediatrician and I thought, hey, you know what? When I was struggling in college trying to think, what am I going to be when I grow up? I thought pediatric. That's where it's at. I set my sights on med school, got into med school, and on my pediatric rotations, I saw that I did not want to become a pediatrician. It was the parents, and I'm a parent myself. It was the parents I didn't want to deal with, and I just did not like it as much as I did the surgical rotations. The surgical rotations gave me this opportunity for almost instant gratification, where the medical subspecialties, you prescribe medications, you see somebody back in weeks or months, you're checking a blood pressure. The changes are very slow. But for me, as an interventionalist who does procedures, we have a blocked artery or there's an appendix that had to come out or any kind of surgical procedure. It was instant gratification. You could fix the problem. So that's how I picked surgery. And initially, I wanted CT surgery. And my kind of aha moment was I was a third year surgery resident, and one of the CT surgeons took me into the library where I trained in the hospital. We were both up late. And essentially, what happened was he was a CT surgeon that was covering the ICU because the CT surgeons in the 90s and early 2000s were really getting put out of business by the cardiologist, so to speak. There was no reason to have your chest cracked open and have an open heart bypass surgery when cardiologists were able to place these minimally invasive stents into the coronary arteries home the same day. And the cardiac surgeons, unfortunately, never learned that technology. They never learned how to do that. They slowly were phased out. Now we still need them. They're around, but they're not doing the everyday bypasses. The cardiologists are putting stents in. So his advice to me, and this was the aha moment, was, hey, listen, you should consider vascular surgery. The baby boomers are getting older. All the technology is going into vascular. You can do the stents and the open surgery check out vascular. And from that moment on, I checked out vascular, and no regrets, no looking back. I love the fact that there's so much technology and innovation in the space, really keeps us all on our toes.
See, this is what I love about you brings up such a great point of the cardiovascular CT versus what you guys are doing in vascular is you guys have been a lot quicker to the punch to jump right in and you're able to do everything now. And everyone is so passionate about being able to do everything. This next generation of vascular surgeon, I don't know. I don't think there's anything they can't do.
Yeah, no, we love hearing that as well, and we do feel like, when you go to a listen, nothing. I've got friends that are cardiologists, my colleagues are cardiologists. We definitely need them, but just there's a lot of turf battle between the cardiologists, interventional radiologists, vascular surgeons. If you had a cardiologist on right now, they'd be telling you that I'm too quick to stop my endovascular procedure and offer a surgical procedure, whereas an IR or cardiologist might just kind of pummel through and really try to get through those clogged arteries because they don't have another option. Whereas I always have that surgical option. So they'll criticize me for quitting too soon. Now I don't think I do, and I really would rather do a stent or something minimally invasive before a bigger surgery.
Yeah.
But they'll say that about me, just like I'll tell them, hey, listen, you guys are killing all the options for surgical bypasses down the road. If they put a stent across an artery where I would normally put a bypass, that jails that target and makes it so a future bypass may not be possible. So we all get into our little bickering. The end game is the same. We all want to take care of patients. There's plenty of them,
There's
and
plenty.
yeah,
It's just, I think the whole idea is, and I think that's what I like about your show. And I'll get into a question, in a moment, that there was a situation where, you're not afraid to actually tackle the controversy. You're not afraid to have that discussion. You're willing to have that discussion and address, some of those issues that could be impacting patients, that could be affecting outcomes, because the last thing you want is the bickering. I mean, I have patients that can't even get care in their area for literally 2 months, 3 months, and I'm like, "Oh my
yeah,
gosh, we need more doctors that are invested in this." The thing is that we just need to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And it was funny, I got a call the other day from a doctor who was an interventionalist because his patient went in there, in the pre-surgical, the prep, and said, "I need you to make sure you preserve a landing zone."
nice. That's go to Google. The patients are smart. They do their
Right.
research. You've got shows like your own where patients can learn, become educated, and the days are gone where the doctor says do this and patients do it. Patients question what we say. I
Yeah,
get it. They look things up. It's a little frustrating when they think that Dr. Google may know more, but it certainly empowers patients to ask the right questions, and we welcome
yeah,
that for sure. We also welcome second opinions. People think that doctors get mad about second opinions. Now, I'm a little jaded, just like you guys are here. When you're in a big city like New York or on the West Coast, there are more vascular surgeons per capita. It's everything in between the middle part of this country and what you're
yeah.
talking. The access to care, like you brought up, is a big issue. And for those patients, second opinions might be hard to come by. But in New York, everyone's second guessing and they want another opinion, and we welcome it. Doctors
Yeah.
should never be offended when patients want to get that second opinion.
The way we phrase it when we educate the patients is just ask them what the contingency plan is. And in those moments where we know it, there are people that jump to bypass surgeries, really quickly, but there are more interventional doctors that are doing a lot, and there needs to be that consideration of what's the contingency plan. So when we talk to patients about having a procedure, number one, do you really need it? Ask your doctor about walking is medicine, and et cetera, et cetera. But what is the contingency plan when it fails? Everything fails. Are they taking into consideration that, what, we do need to preserve a landing zone, we can't jail off the profunda? How often have you seen
Exactly.
that?
Right, that
um
happens. It happens a lot. I feel like it's happening less and less. I feel like as word gets out, the
yes.
cardiologists are not doing that. But this was a big problem 10 years ago, lesser of a problem over the last 5 years or so.
I've had a couple though.
Yeah,
I get
unfortunately.
those outliers. Still happens in some small communities where maybe they don't have, as many options.
Right.
Um,
I could see if you're in a smaller community and maybe there is no vascular surgeon and you know there's no other option, maybe you are just going to jail it because you know there's no vascular surgeon on backup to do that. And that
yeah,
might be the limb saving procedure that that patient needs. So I think you do have to take into account where you're at, what your resources are. Is the patient ever going to be able to tolerate a surgical bypass? These
yeah,
minimally invasive stenting procedures are much easier on the heart. And maybe that doctor, he or she is thinking that this is never going to be an option anyway. It's bad when that always is an option and they do jail it though.
yeah. We just had a patient come to us with 15 stents in the
That's
leg.
terrible.
That's
That's
a
terrible.
lot.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
still seeing a lot
Especially
of
if they were
those,
put
but
in one at a time.
um, it's been a little crazy. But we've also had where it's just one bypass after another bypass after another bypass after another bypass, and the doctor doesn't, the patient has no outflow,
Yeah.
and so you do need a little bit of, the vascular surgeons that we work with will tell me that they'll go in sometimes knowing that a bypass is the best option for the patient, but they'll go in and make sure the outflow is sufficient so there's a place for the blood to go. So they'll go in with the little wire and balloon and going through, pedal access and just double check and make sure all is well. And if they need to use a little balloon, they do. But there have been a couple situations lately that it's kind of working both ways. So the more education that's out there, and this is why I love so much what you're doing, and I love the fact that our patients, have raised, awareness to us that they're actually listening in. I think it's really a good thing that you're having the impact and getting the word out there, and that patients are actually able to make more informed decisions based on the information that you're providing, to make them more informed so that they can ask the right questions when they go to their doctor to ensure there's a productive and satisfying conversation. Right.
Absolutely. And this is what I love best about the show. It's a live show where people can email questions in real time
Mm,
during the broadcast hours, which are 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern time. So I know that's really early for you guys, but it is, they can email or call the questions in. And often they'll be like, hey, I'm going to the doctor later today, or I've got the appointment next week. This is what's going on. And I'll talk to them about some potential questions that they can ask
love
that
it.
doctor.
I love it. So, as director of outpatient vascular interventions at NYU Langone, you've really witnessed the evolution of procedures from inpatient to outpatient settings. How has this shift changed really the overall patient experience? Do you think we talked a little bit about, this shift, and it was one of your aha moments as well. And what innovations have you championed and you actually love to share about on your show so that other people know about them so they can discuss them with their doctor, or doctors can say, hey, to their hospital, we need to do something. We need to bring these things in.
Right, absolutely. The outpatient is definitely here to stay. There was a lot of criticism early on. Is it safe? These are sick patients, and these can be issues. There can be issues where people thought, oh, it's safer to be in the hospital. We've proven that to really not be the case. And like they say, out of tragedy comes opportunity. I've been waiting and looking for an opportunity to start an outpatient vascular practice. This is 13, 14 years ago. But
Yeah.
with bureaucracy and red tape, it was difficult. But then Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast. My institution is on First Avenue, which is close to the water, and the water levels rose around Manhattan. And the 3 hospitals I worked at, they were literally underwater. Patients were evacuated out of the hospitals, and overnight, hospitals shut down, no problem. Bellevue, where I cover, oldest hospital in the country, open for over 250 years, had never shuttered its lights. Hurricane Sandy was the biggest storm to hit the Northeast, and even Bellevue was shut down. Well, we had patients that were on the docket on the surgical schedule for procedures to happen that next day and over the next several days and weeks. And I had already been eyeing out a guy who had been doing some pain medicine procedures and some dialysis access procedures where he had a mobile C-arm in an outpatient facility in an office. And we just pivoted to starting to do the patients right there and then never stopped. We started
That's
doing them there.
amazing.
Now, of course, everyone questions and says, well, isn't the hospital mad you're not doing the surgeries there? It turns out the hospitals are actually happier when you're doing the endovascular procedures offsite. These are costly procedures for the hospital. The grafts cost a lot, the materials cost a lot. And it's expensive to be in an operating room when you don't need to be in an operating room. So by decanting endovascular procedures to an office-based setting to allow bigger, open, more serious surgeries to happen in the hospital, it ended up being a win-win for the hospital.
And, I think that that's great. And even for the independent ones, I would like to see um, more regulation and standardization, just as you have when
Definitely.
it comes to the, um, for when, with heart, with the ASCs now, where they're doing more heart, but making sure everything's standardized beforehand, because, we have a situation somewhere, which I'm happy to share offline, but we're going through a situation right now with a office-based facility where, we've had two patients come to us that didn't even have PAD and ended up with stents and now have a problem. So
Right.
that's the outlier, that's the exception to the rule. I know 99% of the doctors that we work with everywhere are really trying to do the right thing, but I think that there needs to be, the standardization across the board, right?
Right. 100%. And I think this is what you were talking about earlier about empowering patients to ask the questions, is this the right therapy for me? Most patients who are
Yeah.
claudicating and just have pain don't need a procedure. It's great to get on the schedule and everyone needs to be aware, but you really have to modify behaviors, maybe be on a statin, be on an aspirin. If you're smoking, you really got to stop smoking. So it's these things are the first line therapy. But yeah, what you're talking about, the abuse, you see that in all fields of medicine. It's definitely terrible. But when you're doing it for the right reason, the outpatient setting is certainly just as
Yeah.
safe, if not more safe, than a hospital setting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have great success, and it's amazing because I can always get the patient in that day. No matter where it is, they can always find a way to squeeze the patient in, get them in. It makes it easier if I have to cover, the copay cost or whatever it might be. It's easier for me in my team to deal with the billing department in these smaller places. But we've had, great success. We've even had some cases that were, the insurance just wasn't a match, but they were willing to even do pro bono to just get the patient the limb saving care they needed and worry about insurance later. So there have been great things, but it's just across the board. I think it'd be great for everybody to come together, make sure that we have, some what do you call it? Just some ways in which we can police everybody, self-police. Last thing we need is more, government. But the self-policing, I think, would be really amazing to be able to have someone from a society call up, for example, this one, doctor in this situation to say, hey, come on, we know it's happening, not blaming anyone. Can we be a little bit more careful because it's going to affect, the rest of us? Having
Right.
that type of accountability would be really amazing.
Yes.
So,
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
um,
The Society for Vascular Surgery came to me, probably 2 or 3 years now, saying, "Hey, we're going to start an accreditation body to look at OBLs and certify them." And they were just wanting to do the vascular surgery OBLs. And I said, "Listen, when it comes to the outpatient lab, it is a joint effort between cardiology, interventional radiology, and vascular surgery, and you
yeah,
can't exclude 2 out of 3. If we're going to
no,
do this, it's got to be multiple societies coming together." Not just
yeah,
looking at the vascular surgeons, but really looking at everybody to make sure everybody
yep,
kind of falls into the same standards.
yep. Oh, I love you already. Exactly. So, um, medical communication really
Yeah.
struggles, with balancing scientific accuracy and accessibility. What's your approach to really making those vascular concepts engaging, without that oversimplification? And the one thing that I have and my patients have an issue with, they're really tired of people saying that they're uneducated and using the word uneducated and then using the terminology of, oh, we need to talk to a sixth grade education. Like, no one likes to hear that kind of thing, and they know this is happening. But what they love about your show is you're talking to them, you're not talking at them, and you're not talking down to them. And that was one of the quotes I got from one of the patients.
Oh, that's really nice. No, I feel like there's an art of the number one, the patient visit, and there's an art of being able to communicate this on the radio. I think from a patient visit, you're able to sit there eye to eye or below eye level. There's this, there's a lot of to me, body language that goes into that office visit. You can't be looking at your iPhone. You want to be at or below their level. You want to be engaged with the patient, and you want to be
Yeah.
talking at their level. You can have a conversation and immediately know kind of where you're at and when you're using too big a word or too little a word, and kind of meet them at that place so they feel comfortable and you're right in the sweet spot. A little bit more difficult on the radio because you're just have a microphone in front of your mouth and you're kind of talking. So you really want to keep that's a little bit different. And I kind of standardize that. It's interesting because this is a Sirius XM show, and Sirius XM has 160 million paid subscribers. So
Yeah.
you're looking at half our country has Sirius XM. And when they share their stats, most of their patients, most of their subscribers do have at least 1 year of college education, and the average household income is above the national median. So they're slightly more well off, they're slightly more educated, and do have some college. So I can talk at that level with most of the people. And that's kind of how I look at that, the Sirius XM show.
But when interviewing colleagues with different approaches to vascular intervention and different philosophies and things like that, and I'm sure you get really immersed in the conversation and you have your own opinions, you have your own experiences, right? How do you
Yeah.
maintain, and I don't know if you try to maintain, it seems as though you do, you're really good at being that just unbiased moderator, but how do you maintain what I would consider a journalistic integrity while ensuring that listeners do receive like a balanced, perspective, that you don't, you kind of play a little bit of the devil's advocate there with
Yeah.
some of the people that might have strong opinions versus yours or whatever.
Right. Well, I love that. And first of all, I love a good banter back and forth with somebody. I do think it shouldn't be all kumbaya. Hey, this is all great. It's nice to have different opinions and to talk about where they're coming from. And it's also nice to have a common ground, that you're sharing a common goal with the concept you're
Yep.
trying to get through there. But this is an early morning show, and it's easy. Most doctors sound very boring, and it's easy to get on that show at 6 a.m. And if I could tell that they're putting the audience to sleep and they're just going to change the channel and go somewhere else, I really want to bring it back and have some intonation in my voice and not just be monotone, boring. So I want to really try to change the tone of the conversation for those early morning talks. And most of the doctors that are on there don't have any media experience. So I'm just asking them questions. They might be kind of nervous. And we're just trying to kind of have some banter back and forth. And again, I'm trying to talk on their level, but then I'll repeat it and kind of say it at the normal person kind of level, and not the boring doctor level. So, it's about getting that right sweet spot. And I love a good argument back and forth. Like, one thing about Sirius XM and Dr. Radio, really, not Sirius XM, Dr. Radio doesn't take money from industry. So they're not biased. Even during COVID, where a lot of people went to Dr. Radio for their source of information, we weren't, people accuse us of getting paid by pharma and this and that, or paid for every vaccine we gave somebody. That's obviously not true. But we had unbiased information. We were given real-time information as we were figuring it out, and cases were kind of blowing up in New York City and people were dying. We were just kind of describing our experience, what we know, what we don't know. And there was no bias from the standpoint of industry or other kind of marketing, flair kind of coming in there. So I like the fact that there's no agenda other than my own, which is just to educate. I'm not getting paid to talk about certain topics on that show. It's just fun for me. Most New Yorkers don't even listen to Sirius XM. They've got Spotify on and they're walking to and from work. It's really the rest of America who has to get in a car and drive. Those are the people that are listening. So I do get patients from the show, but it's not tons of patients. Maybe 5 to 10% of my practice are listeners. Most people are just New Yorkers that kind of walk through the door and I'm seeing in my office. So, it's interesting, and it's certainly fun for me.
Two questions come to mind, like, do I go after the impact on a patient, or do I go after the challenging? I think the challenging moment first, though, because I'm curious if you could share just a particularly challenging moment and how you approached it while maintaining both that scientific integrity and the respect for the different viewpoints that are out there.
I have to say that it's a live show, so I would say that there was maybe I'm reading your question a little bit wrong, but from an awkward moment where things weren't right. It's a live show, and my producer does, people call in, the producer screens the call. If it sounds reasonable to her, she puts it onto my board, and I see the person's first name, the state they're coming from, and about 8 words is what their question is. And I had a plastic surgeon on. We were talking reconstructive surgery because there's some symbiosis between vascular and plastics when it comes to the arteries and reconnecting them. And again, this is a 6 a.m. Eastern time show. This was somebody from California, and I should have known, California, it's now 3 a.m. When they put him through, he was clearly inebriated, out of his mind, talking about, congratulating the plastic surgeon on making the world a better place for doing breast augmentations, but he didn't say it so eloquently. And I had to cut him off, but not like say anything. So I'm trying to give the cutoff sign to my producer through the glass window, but she's taking another call and she's not looking at me saying cut off. So that was an awkward moment for me where he's on the air saying stuff that I thought was not appropriate to be on the show, and there's no delay. It's on there and it's coming. So, and that's going to get replayed. So, that was an awkward moment for me for sure.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely challenging. Yeah, and that would be the okay. Now that was exciting.
Right. Now, listen, I'll have people, we'll patch them through. It'll be somebody who's much older telling me, you got to slow down. You're talking way too fast. I can hear about every third word you're talking about. And I'll get that every now and then. And I get it. I might be speaking too fast for that one patient, and I'll slow it down for that conversation. But most people, I think, who are listening to this don't want a dull, slow discussion. We're going to have some banter back and forth. And I get it. It's early in the morning, but I drink my coffee. I think everyone else has to just drink theirs, and let's get on it.
Have you ever found any sort of, challenge with someone that really completely disagreed with you and you had to manage it because you're being diplomatic, but they're just getting heated?
Yes, I would say this more happened around COVID, people calling up, telling them that the shots were causing blood clots. And this was very frustrating. This is somebody from, I don't know where, they had no medical kind of background, but, they knew some person that got a shot for COVID and got a blood clot. And this happened. We definitely know that it was rare, but they were definitely some associated clots with the shot. But what we know from patients in the hospital with COVID, it was like a 20 or 30% chance you were getting a blood clot. So your chances of getting a clot with active COVID when you're hospitalized was exponentially higher than the few million shots, per every million shots that patients were taking. So we recognize it as an issue, but you got to medicine is always looking at two options, whatever is riskier, taking the opposite. And while, yes, there are side effects, they're rare, and they can be serious, the real disease in this situation, when it first came out, in my opinion, it was worth getting the shot, and it was reducing your risk of becoming severely ill or getting a blood clot at a much higher rate than the actual clot from the shot was causing. Now, listen, things have changed. I feel like we all have our own, innate immunity. So what we've been exposed to it. And I'm not a big proponent of the COVID vaccine anymore. I was the first to put my arm out there and get a shot in New York and to recommend it to everybody. And I think everybody should have that one shot. I get the flu shot every year, but I'm not a personal believer. I don't think it's necessary, in my opinion, to keep getting that, because we're just not seeing that. We're not seeing the COVID hospitalizations with blood clots in 2025.
It's interesting because I was the one that was one of the crazy rare exceptions that was injured by it. I'm banned from getting them. I'm a huge vaxxer. But I still was a proponent to get it and to talk to your doctor about doing that. So, there was a lot of just
some patient
craziness out there.
You don't strike me as the kind, but I think if you have the comorbidities, and having COVID would be devastating. If you're overweight and pulmonary, then yes, I think you may still want to get it, but I don't think the average Joe needs to worry about it. Do you mind me asking what the allergic reaction was? Was it something in the vaccine itself?
So it triggered the way the I didn't believe the first rheumatologist, because as I said, I'm a huge, any vaccine I'm ready to get. I just turned 50. I'm like, okay, where's my pneumonia and where's my shingles? Right. And and they're preventing me from doing anything right now till we make sure everything's not gonna. But it turns out that I have I'm autoimmune in my, in hereditarily. And so I believe it just triggered the autoimmune response somehow in my body that turned on the gene. And I lost use of my right arm for a year, ended up with joint leakage.
Wow.
I ended up anaphylactic to dairy, gluten. My dad always jokes, and this is just funny. He's like, the only three things you're not allergic to anymore are vodka, water, and celery. It's just his funny
Right, right.
thing. But
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's terrible, especially in somebody who wants to get the vaccine, but it's always risk benefit. If you're going to have an episode like that with a vaccine, you're better off dealing with the pneumonia than not using your right arm.
I know. So I've now gone back and so we've strengthened it, but it turns out that my mom also had an autoimmune condition. She didn't react. She reacted fine to the first two. The third one didn't go so well. But she also, it turns out, had autoimmune conditions. And so it just runs in our family. And we are part of a study because they were fascinated by our case. So
Gotcha.
I'm one of those interesting ones,
All right.
but I'm alive and well.
Nice.
Um, I know, right? But we were always about with our organization throughout their entire thing. I was very blessed to have great vascular surgeons and cardiologists that were leading our direction with all of our patients. And we did lose a couple out of, at the time, we had about 7,000 patients in our network. But with our guidance and support, helping with, adjunctive support to what was happening in the healthcare system where we could be there for our patients. There was only two that I knew of that ultimately ended up succumbing to COVID. But everyone did really well, especially with the community support that we were providing when the hospitals, could not be there. So
Right. Right. Well, again, taking it back to your initial question, I feel like that will certainly trigger some discussion with some, people having opinions on both
yeah,
sides, and I certainly welcome different opinions as well. But it's interesting when the opinion's coming from somebody that doesn't have the background or knowledge. It's hard to fight emotion with facts. So I think just like
yeah.
when I'm having an argument with my wife, I can't fight emotion with facts. It's emotion
Nope.
and emotion, and facts with facts. You can't mix the two.
Yeah, and it's good. You got to be diplomatic, but I can tell you're a really good listener, and that's, me too. I'm not here to judge anyone. We're just here to share and have a diplomatic discussion. And interesting, and I always hope that it is more fact-based. With the patients, there is a lot of emotion. So I like, to balance that out, which works out really, really well.
Yes.
Um, but in the history of your show, is there a particular episode or topic that generated the most listener response? And I'm curious what that actually taught you about public interest in vascular health, if at all.
It turns out that people just like to hear and talk about things that they think affect them or that they're dealing with. So if I have a neurologist on and we're talking about some rare kind of brain tumor that doesn't affect a lot of people, you're not going to get people emailing in and calling in. But when you take the common things like blood clots, varicose veins, clogged
Mm,
arteries, like these are buzzwords that people like, hey, I'm at risk for this. I have this. This
yep.
is what generates calls. And one thing that SiriusXM doesn't have is any idea of who's listening. They've got satellites up 250,000 feet that are circling, beaming down data, but they don't know who's listening. In their world, they say that it takes about 7 to 10,000 people listening to generate one phone call or email, so they can extrapolate based on how many calls are coming in. And if I have a show where I'm just talking about the minutia of treating P.A.D. with atherectomy and drug-coated balloon angioplasty, I'm not getting the calls during that segment like I am with blood DVTs, varicose veins. Those are the big ones, unfortunately, because everyone's got veins, and when you hear blood clot, everyone knows somebody, if not themselves, who's had one. So that's what gets
Let's
the
get
phones ringing.
let's get Dr. Anita Dua back on, and let's talk about walking as medicine and how to walk effectively. You can grow those collateral vessels. People
Exactly.
love
Yes, I
that.
have her on my show. She is great. She is great.
We do love her.
Yes,
So was
she
there
is.
any
I
one
saw her on your show
guest?
too. You had a great episode with her as well.
She just she has the most watched episode. You know who's also very interesting? She's an up and comer that I don't know if you know, but I really like her a lot. Dr. Lily Johnston. She's just getting involved with the Society for Vascular Surgery's Highway to Health campaign, and she is an expert in metabolic health. Fascinating to talk to her about the root cause that she's discovering of all the, cardiovascular and vascular diseases, and how she talks to her patients. And oh, it's absolutely fascinating. So
I'll have to check her
she's
out.
great. She is our current, so she's given Dr. and I to do a run for her money in terms of most watched videos. She's getting right in there. So she might be an interesting one, just because she can talk across topics in a very general way that's relatable. So might be kind of fun.
Excellent.
But
Yeah,
but that was
definitely.
leading to my next question. So those were two that have left me, with you just had the greatest impact on me. I'm curious, first off, if there was one particular guest that has literally had the most impact on you, the most impact on your audience, and then secondarily, was there a guest that left you incredibly surprised, or who was the one that left you most surprised by what they shared or their perspective?
I would have to say one of the best guests I ever had on the show was my dad, from the standpoint
What?
of he's an older guy and he's in really good shape. And his question to me was, Todd, I'm pushing it hard. How hard is too hard? And I didn't know. I'm like, what do you tell a guy in his mid 70s who likes to bike and likes to run, and he's getting his heart rate up there? I mean, you hear stories of young people who are in shape that drop dead, while they're running, and you always wonder what the heck was going on. And likely those cases were like an arrhythmia or maybe something else. But so I had a sports medicine doctor on there and my dad both together to answer the show, because there's a lot of older people out there that I think are still in great shape as these baby boomers get older.
Mm.
The ones that are exercising are still exercising. And the question was, how much is too much? And really what came out of that, number one, is great having my dad in the studio on the show, was that there isn't too much. If you should be, at 90% of your maximum perceived effort. If you're at 140% for any of us, that's too much. But if you're working out hard, there's no such thing as too hard for any kind of age level. So it was nice to have him on there, get those answers, and that was probably one of the more meaningful shows for me.
Was there any guest that actually surprised you? You were like, wait, did you really say that?
I'm not surprised often. I don't like it when people start to bring their political views on shows. I feel like medicine is
Yeah,
not a place for politics. And
yeah,
I've been turned
me
off when
too.
people start going in that direction. So I think you keep
Me
it
too.
clean. This is not a political platform. And anytime that people start to use it for that, I get disengaged.
I am 100%. I'm 100% of the patients, and whatever I need to do to just help the patients, wherever, whomever, doesn't matter. We're just here. How can we navigate to help the patients? And
Right.
so
No
I'm right
agenda.
there.
Love it. Yep.
Yep. Um, was there any particular guest that actually managed to change your way of thinking about some aspect of vascular medicine or patient care? I mean, I know you were just talking about your dad and hearing that, hey, there isn't, too much exercise, but um, at any age. But is there anything else that you remember that you go, huh, that was kind of an aha moment for me, that it changed your way of thinking somehow?
Yeah, I love having guests on there that are not vascular surgeons. Occasionally, I'll have that Dr. Anahita Dua or some of my colleagues on. And when we're talking vascular, every time I ask them a question, I feel like it's a loaded question, because I feel like I know the answer. I want to hear their answer. It may be similar to mine, and we'll have some banter back and forth. But when I have somebody who's a different kind of physician, whether it's a neurologist, whether it's an orthopedic
Yeah.
surgeon, whether it's an anesthesiologist, I love getting their perspective. So I'd say almost every show, I leave there with almost an aha moment, like, wow, I didn't know that. I'm actually asking questions that I want to know, thinking that others probably want to know these same questions too. And so that's how I stay engaged and can do the show, because I'm just asking questions that I generally want to know the answer to. And I think other folks want to know the answer as well. So I leave most of those shows with, wow, I learned something from this.
See, that's so important. So what's the funniest or most unexpected thing that's happened during a broadcast? I know you mentioned the drunk
Yeah.
plastic surgeon that called in at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's always
Yeah.
fun and unexpected, but
Yeah, my mother-in-law once called in the show, and I was like, "What the heck are you doing?" I didn't realize that she even listened to the show. And when she called in from Oxford, Mississippi, that was certainly very interesting. I was like, Glenna, you can ask me this anytime. You don't have to call in the radio show. This is something she could have texted me or asked me literally anytime. But that was always a funny one. Yeah, there's nothing in particular. I've been doing it for so long, and it's 2 hours, and there's a lot going on. So I never kind of leave like emotionally changed, but I'll definitely learn from others on there for sure.
If you could have anyone in the world as a guest on your show, past or present, medical, non-medical, who would actually be your ultimate dream guest? And then what would you actually want to discuss with them?
It's interesting. There's not one person, but I always thought would make for a great show if you can get people that are famous, whether they're musicians, actors, comedians that people know and people want to listen to. I'd love to have some banter back and forth with any one of those people about any medical issue that they're having, whether it's vascular or anything else. I think that would make for a great show where you've got a guest who other people can relate to, who they like to listen to or watch for one reason or another, and then we could talk about their medical issue if they were willing to share that. I think that would make a great idea for a program.
So I have the idea for you. Let's get Deion Sanders.
Let's do it. Let's do it. That's a
Let's
start,
talk
and then we
about
just got to get more like that. Yes.
just so that you don't have, I mean, his doctors are great. They are great. But there's that edge that they're not calling it peripheral artery disease. And I would love that moment where you could just say, come on, dude, it's peripheral
Just call
artery
it.
disease.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
hypercoagulable, but
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, when that all went down, Dr. Radio loves to pick up on things in the news. When there's a hockey player, a baseball player that gets Paget von Schroeder, thoracic outlet syndrome from a pinched artery or pinched vein, these are things that make the news, and we'll talk about that. And when the Deion Sanders came on, there were some things going on where when
yeah,
we tried to contact those doctors, everything was kind of shut down because of some things behind the scenes that were happening that may have gone like not in an ideal way. So we kind of never ran with the Deion Sanders, for lack of better words, with his story. But for the hockey players and baseball players and volleyball players that
yeah,
do get popliteal artery entrapment syndrome or thoracic outlet
it's a
syndrome,
huge one.
we love to highlight them and talk to them on there if they're willing to talk.
Yeah, one of our patients is actually a legendary Harlem Globetrotter, and it's the 100-year anniversary of the Harlem Globetrotters. And so I'm happy to make that introduction. He is very vocal. He is on the cover of one of our P.A.D brochures at his request with his story. So he'd be probably more than happy
Oh, that'd be a great
to.
one. Yeah.
He's just fascinating, and he has one leg. We were able to help save his other one, and he's doing great advocating, for himself now, which is amazing. But he's
Yeah.
he's a he's a good guy. So happy to introduce you to that one.
Yeah.
But we're
I love it.
running in here on our tail end. I don't want to take up all your time. I could talk to you forever, but we have some questions that we like to ask every awardee because it draws out just some really fun, interesting stories. And a couple of the series are sponsored by one's by Reflow Medical and other ones by Biomedics. And this one in particular is from, Reflow as an educational moment for physicians and clinicians, but keeping in mind that patients also listen to this as well. But describe a case that you learned a lesson from that other physicians or clinicians can learn from. It could be a success, it could be a failure, whatever it might be, but it's a case that always stands out to you as a lesson that you learned that others could potentially learn from.
I think that first of all, shout out to Reflow. I think that's the second time I heard your name was when I was going out to the Reflow headquarters, looking at their factory. They make some really neat products, and they're
Yeah.
really a tiny company, and they've got a new product that's used in P.A.D patients to treat the smaller blood vessels below the knee. And I was the first in New York to use this device. And when I went out to California, they mentioned Kim McNichols. And I think that might have been right when I had texted you about trying to get you on my show, which we still have to do. But I think the biggest thing, and I could think of 5 or 10 patients that were misdiagnosed with acute limb ischemia, and it may have not been the kind of acute that's the 10 out of 10 pain, but it was a 5 or 7 out of 10 where the primary care physician thought it was something else, thought it was a pulled calf muscle, thought it was arthritis. and these patients kind of were really delayed in their presentation. And then it becomes a real tour de force to kind of restore the blood flow. And you're really hoping that you can do it. And number two, hoping that you can do it and they still have neurological function, because the nerves are most sensitive to the lack of oxygen. And when you don't have blood flow, the nerves take a hit first. So if you can restore everything and you don't have dead muscle, you really want to hope that you don't have dead nerves, because with a dropped foot, it's really hard to rehab and get back to your normal activities. So I would say the biggest and the most memorable patients are the delayed presentations for acute limb ischemia. And this really comes down to patients questioning it and primary care physicians understanding as well, because these are the docs that initially missed it, because these patients do seek care and they expect their primary care physician to understand PAD or acute limb ischemia, and these patients in particular were missed.
And it's one of those situations I'm seeing more and more, because we look at PAD now, there's a top down disease and the bottoms up disease. And the ones with the bottoms up disease, more the diabetics, the chronic kidney disease patients, they come across as being asymptomatic until they're literally not. And they're
Good
in
point.
advanced stage. And the big thing is, how are we getting to them sooner? The ARC Act is a big push. I hear there's going to be a big vascular meeting on Capitol Hill in October for that, to try and get to these high risk patients sooner. And you bring up such a good point that these poor primary care doctors, there's so many different things that can mimic PAD,
Yeah.
but the most important thing is, how do we get them? And our producer Josh is going to love this. They have this Think Aorta campaign. I think we need to work with them to do a Think P.A.D. How do we get them to think
Yes.
PAD?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, it's, you got to get the word out there. It's how do people consume information at that level? Is it their meetings? I would say no. I mean, is it through social media? Is it email blasts? I don't know what works, and I think it's just different for every physician. But I agree, you've got to raise awareness so primary care physicians are thinking PAD.
So share the story. You're going to love this one. This is one of my favorite ones, and it just is always inspirational. We have patients that share their stories all the time. For some reason, and everyone tries to put out the patient stories. I have found, and Douglas, who's here in our live studio audience, will always attest to the fact that they actually prefer hearing the doctors telling the stories. So we came up with this question for you to share the story, a doctor to share the story of a patient who actually impressed you with their effort to improve their PAD prognosis through their own efforts, their own perseverance, their own might.
Yeah, I mean, I think of two patients, and both were very, very early in my practice. First one, bad diabetic patient with significant peripheral arterial disease. I met her when she was smoking and was on the verge of losing her foot, and we were able to save her foot. And when we educated her about the disease, she had this 180 turnaround where we had treated her, and then she'd stopped smoking and started working out and taking all of her medications. And this is now like 14, 15 years ago, and she still comes and sees me. She's since moved to Florida, but when she comes up from Florida to New York, she'll schedule a visit with me. She'll send me email updates every 3-4 months telling me what she's doing. So these are patients that I love. Now, unfortunately, she almost lost her leg to get her in a position to change this. And if most patients, you could take them before they lose their leg and say, hey, listen, if you could almost just lose your leg, you would have a whole different perspective. She had her leg saved, and she changed everything around, and it was amazing. And I love getting her messages. The next lady was this God-fearing lady who came in at 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve, and I happened to be on call my first year in practice. She had a cold leg, and she had an embolus that went from her heart into her leg. Leg was ice cold, no motor. 2 a.m. I came in there, nothing fancy. I did an embolectomy where I made a tiny little incision, pulled out the clot, and then did fasciotomies, because when you reperfuse a leg, it can swell. So we did this maneuver for her, and then she came into my, and she did great. 2 weeks later, she comes into my office initially with a check for $200,000. And I thought she was crazy. I can't accept this. And I didn't even think she had the money. I thought she was just being generous. She comes back 2 weeks after that with a bunch of people from the NYU development team in nice, crisp suits. And she's like, I want to give you $500,000 to go work with other vascular surgeons all around the world. Do you like to travel? And I said, yes. She's like, great. I want you to go. I want you to take your family. I want you to go to different countries, work with vascular surgeons, and share all the great things that you do. I was like, well, thank you so much. I used an old technique on you. There was nothing great. She's like, but there's so much innovation going on at NYU. I want you to go share that everywhere. So once a year for 2 weeks, I go to a different place. It's been Thailand, Indonesia. I've gone to South Africa, Morocco, Vietnam. We'll go everywhere. I'll bring the wife and kiddos. They'll travel along. I'll work with the vascular surgeons in that area. And where initially her thought was show them all the technology. When you go to these places, it turns out they do 80 to 90% of the work we do with 5% of the resources. We have all these great companies like Reflow Medical. These are expensive devices. They work great. But when you bring this to a country that can't afford, healthcare or food for their family, you don't have the luxury of these really nice devices that we have here. So I end up learning from them how you could really take care of patients with very few resources, and that has really impacted me the most.
Miguel Montero Baker with Hope Vascular over in Texas told me this story, and he actually has a video of his test. Was he brought a bunch of vascular surgeons from across the globe. He brought them all into Mexico and said, you need to save all of these patients with a balloon and a wire. Miraculously, they were able to do it. I mean, it's amazing what they can do with a little finesse, a really good wire technique.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no, you can get scrappy with things, and I think that's really what it's about. I mean, we have the luxury of all this technology. Why not use it? But it turns out in other parts of the world, they can do really good things with a fraction of the resources we have.
Yeah, I would love to. Every time you go on those trips, I would love to interview you about the experience and the journey with the patients and the impact that you've had and the patient stories. Would love, 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 love to do that. That would be, and even if we did something live from there with that doctor, would be incredible. And their team, to highlight their team and what they're doing and what they're learning from you, would be just spectacular.
That would be a
Well,
great
that's a
idea.
great show idea for you too.
Yeah.
So, this is one of my favorite questions. And it's there's a little competition between some of the doctors on this one. Again, right now, our two lead runners are Anida Dua and Lily Johnston. Although Ankur Thapar, fascinating guy out of the UK, our global luminary of the year, the research they're doing on P.A.D. is mind blowing. And he is now in the running with his presentation he gave on motivational speech on walking is medicine. So give me your best motivational speech to get me to get off the couch and grow those collateral vessels.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, first of all, not a competition. I submit to them. I haven't heard what they've said, but I would love to hear other strategies. I've been using the same kind of commentary for all my patients. When you try to describe PAD and the concept of angiogenesis or creating new blood vessels to kind of go around blocked arteries, what you're trying to tell patients is you want to push through. You're not going to open up these clogged arteries, but as long as you're not smoking, you're taking an aspirin and taking your statin, as you push it, you'll have this concept of angiogenesis to create these alternate collateral blood vessels. But if you just stop walking right when you feel pain, that process won't initiate. You won't get angiogenesis if you just stop at the first moment of pain. So my message to patients is you really want to create these alternate pathways. You've got to walk. As you start to feel that burning and pain in your calf and you want to stop, don't stop, take 20 more steps. And right as you're in so much excruciating pain, take 5 more steps. And right when you're done with those 5, give me 2 more. So I'm telling them to just keep pushing it. And over a period of weeks, it's not one day, but weeks and even months, they'll walk further and further without having the pain. And so that's my spiel.
I love that. That's amazing. And that's exactly, because they always ask us, I don't know, am I going to hurt myself? I always think that I'm going to hurt myself. And my doctor always says, well, if you feel pain, stop. And one of our patients, Dawn, she's like, I don't think I would have lost my leg if my doctor told me to keep pushing through, because if I knew I was going to lose my leg as I did, I would have walked through that pain. I just didn't know. So it's the most important message ever is to walk through that pain.
Yep.
Okay, my final question.
All
This
right.
one is also from the patients. A moment with a patient that still has you shaking your head, something patients can learn from. There are mistakes that patients, can make that just still have you shaking your head. Oh my God, I can't believe they did this or said that. And I have to give you this little disclaimer. It's not to mock the patients. The patients love these stories and they learn from them. It's not like if you saw that big viral TikTok video of the gynecology office that was literally, creating fear for women who go and playing on the fear of women who go and the judgment of things and the experiences. So it's not like that. It's more that the patients can resonate with these things. I'll give you a couple examples. We had Dr. David Armstrong on, I think it was last week, and he shared that patients with diabetic neuropathy, there is a risk they can't feel something if they have a wound on their toe. Keep your foot covered properly, because the dog will eat your toe. And this one patient ended up with two different times, didn't learn the first time, but the second time, the dog ate the toe. Another patient, this one was from Dr. George Adams, who you might know out of UNC Rex, North Carolina. He was sharing that it's really important for a lot of these patients to lose weight, tough for them to lose weight. The patient said, well, I'm going to go on a cleanse with a bunch of my friends. Dr. Adams like, I don't know anything about cleanses. You do you, see a dietitian, whatever you're going to do. But yes, you do need to lose weight. Ends up in the emergency room, maybe a month later or so. And he was in AFib. And he's like, what the heck? You seem to be fine before. What triggered it? Is there an event, something you did? And he's like, well, call me if you think of something. A couple weeks later, he gives him a call. He's like, yeah, I did do something. Um, Enemas, I discovered, don't go in the end that I used it in. So that one was awesome. We've had
Interesting.
Dr. David Alper, who talked about patients with diabetes that would staple their socks to their legs. That's a no-no because they don't feel anything and they wanted to keep their socks up.
Wow, these are great, great examples here. I'm just
Mhm.
not seeing these kinds of things or hearing these kinds of stories. Now, the cleanses, ring home to me. Patients when they want to make that turnaround, I have seen that. I have heard about that, and I've seen the cleanses cause a lot of problems. Some of them, people go down to Chinatown and get a concoction of herbs that are unknown to any of us, and come in with fulminant pancreatitis because they were taking this cleanse. And so these are the stories that I hear about, like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
But really, I think the patients that, and really one patient who is almost close to my age, who has no other medical factors and issues, kind of ignored a cold leg for a long time. Not one leg was clearly colder than the other. The primary care doc did not pick it up, did not realize it. She had a little ulcerated plaque in her femoral artery that was embolizing, shooting clots down the leg, clogging up all of her tibial vessels. And over a period of weeks, she was not able to walk and the foot was cold. And everybody, I had not met her yet, was still in denial that this was a cold leg. And I would say that,
Oh, wow.
it just seemed obvious to me, and it should have been obvious to other medical doctors, that when the leg is cold and feels cold and looks discolored, that's a problem. And that's not time for a cleanse.
No. Good. That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
So these are all, I mean, they're always so important. I mean, we've had people share very serious ones, like that, and that's really good. We've had patients. I was in the Netherlands when a patient came in with a garbage bag around her leg, and the doctor was like, "And how did you wait this long?" Well, I didn't want to be a bother and I wasn't sure. And I thought maybe the smell was because I hadn't been in the shower for a while.
Oh, geez. Terrible.
Yeah, it was
Terrible.
it was bad.
Yeah.
They were able to preserve the knee through new technology that, I was there following and doing a story on, but she still lost, below the knee. And it was
Yeah.
bad. But
Terrible.
if you have a wound, you need to get to the doctor. You have a cold leg, get to the doctor. You need to push for that
Exactly.
vascular evaluation. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Dr. Berland. I mean, educating here, educating on our show. It's no wonder I think everyone can see why you were the 2025 Excellence in Vascular
Thank
Innovation
you.
and Public Education Award recipient through the
Thank you. Thank
Global
you.
P.A.D. Impact Awards. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you do to help save life and limb.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thank you. Thank you.